Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got another digital nomad for you, Jen Katsev, originally from Silicon Valley, now in Bulgaria. And she is here to talk to us all about creating the life of your dreams, living authentically. She's got a fantastic story of recovering people pleasing, overachiever, which is describes me. And I'm really happy to ask her questions and just pick her brain. So, Jen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of a lag, but talk about your
Uh-oh.
journey and your story and
Yeah.
how you got started. Yeah.
Yeah. So my journey it is an interesting one. So I'm mostly from the Bay Area. I grew up there my whole life. And I actually went to college for fine art in painting, and there weren't that many career options. And I became very obsessed with learning how to make money. So I did find myself in sales jobs and then a career in real estate investing. And then I met my husband, who was an IT. And on our wedding day, we received an apiary with 100 beehives, which is his like family business from 5 generations ago, like 100-year tradition. And the funny part is he's allergic to bees. But that was in 2019. And we decided to quit our jobs and move to his home country, Bulgaria, which is where the bees are. And that's where I live now. And what I do today, other than having my honey company, it's called Bulgarian Honey Company, is also I am a life coach. And this is something that I've been pretty passionate about and doing like dabbling in, I guess, for the last 7 years. But this year I decided, you know what, I'm going to make my debut. I'm coming out, like I'm going to put my name on the front and actually like start life coaching under my brand, which is the Dream Method, which I'm sure I'll share about later.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating journey and a story. And so one thing, and I love this talking about is because a lot of the audience, they're doctors, lawyers, dentists, and they're also people pleasing overachievers. So talk about kind
Yes.
of the symptoms and how you got out of that.
Oh gosh. There's so many. And I think it's very common, like you as also an Asian American, I'm going to guess, like we share a lot of the cultural background as well, where we're driven by negative emotions. Guilt and shame are very predominant ones, and never being good enough in order to spark performance, with adults like parents and then other people's parents. Just the whole environment is about high performance by making you think you're not good enough. So you strive for better. And so, what are the symptoms? Low self esteem, living someone else's life, not really knowing what you want because you're so focused on making someone else happy by living their dream, meaning living the career that they've always wanted for you, or, taking on instruments or activities that would make them be proud of you or brag about you or go to the university that would make your family look good, for example, and then just having no clue what the heck you want to do with your life. Wondering why relationships are failing, or why, for me, this was a big one, not understanding how to process emotions, because expression of negative emotions, such as anger, was like pretty much taboo, forbidden. If I ever felt angry, I would self blame and withhold and go cry in a corner by myself sometimes, if I ever did. And I literally thought when I started as like a customer of personal development courses that I was a human incapable of anger because I never shouted, I never lashed out. I was always very just withhold, like fake smile. And yeah, then I actually learned like I am a freaking angry person who just never expressed it because I had no idea how. So yeah, there were a lot of like important learning curves, I guess, and just how to figure out what I want and have the courage to pursue that, how to understand my emotions and process them in a productive way, and how to actually like have good communication, honest communication, and be not afraid of speaking truth. So yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Because we'll talk about culture and
Yeah.
how to kind of. I think the younger generation, they know how to raise healthier kids. And so the other question is, because you described this process of processing emotions, and I've heard of that, because I've heard of people talk about process emotions, but what is that? I mean, I'm just trying to get a
Yeah.
feel of what that is. What's the process?
So each emotion is a feedback. We have emotions for a reason. They provide valuable information for us. So for an example, when you're a child and you're born, nowadays we have all these complex emotions like guilt and shame and whatever. These are all learned from later in life. When you're born, you have 6 basic emotions. You have anger, you have sadness, you have disgust, like, oh, right? You have happiness, you have surprise. Did I miss one? Excitement, that's the other one. So happiness and excitement, those are easy, right? But for example, anger, what does it teach us? Anger is when a boundary has been crossed. That's when we get angry at someone else or at ourselves. And so when we don't understand that, we don't know what to do about it. We lash out instead of looking at what was the boundary that got crossed. Where is my boundary? And once we look at it from there, we're able to communicate effectively with somebody else. Hey, by the way, this bothered me, or I was bothered when you did this, right? Then we can actually have a discussion about it. Sadness is when there's a misalignment. So for example, something happens and it's not what we want, and we feel sadness, right? So what there is to look at is where that misalignment is. Surprise is something that we're not expecting. So it's not particularly positive or negative, but it's feedback, right? So, okay, like if we don't like surprise, then how do we look at how do we set ourselves up for expectations and whatnot? So with each emotion, there is something that causes it. And once we understand that, then we know how to process it in a more productive way.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And then the next question I have for you is, because we're going to talk about your method, your coaching. How do you especially with culture, how do you when you've got this negative conditioning on the culture, and how do you, as a kid, how do you process that and kind of break free of that, and especially if your values run counter to what your parents want you to do?
I would say, like, especially as a kid, it is especially hard because you are constantly in the environment of your household. So unless you have, like, I don't know, my brother had me, so the older sibling, or some mentor, some teacher, somebody, it is really hard to come to that by yourself. I guess nowadays, my nephew has like TikTok mentors who talk about personal development, and he kind of just has to do it by himself because it's not the language he speaks in his household. So it can be difficult, but I would say try to find your mentors in your safe space and people who know what they're talking about. And
yeah, and so another follow-up question I have for you is, how do what is your dream method, and how does it help people create more authentic and fulfilling lives?
Absolutely. So my dream method is a combination of all of the coaching practices that I've studied and also just participated in. The D stands for defining the real problem, because often we think the problem is like, okay, dating is one that I get a lot. There are no good guys on dating apps. That looks like the problem, right? But the real problem is I feel unworthy of love because, my mother treated me this way when I was a child or whatever. And so one is actually defining what the problem is, the actual correct problem, so you can give the right treatment, right? And, this is a doctor. We have to diagnose it correctly. The R is for removing the root cause. So this has a lot to do with digging deep into the subconscious and removing those root limiting beliefs that are often not even visible on the conscious level. The E stands for exposing and expressing your true self. So here we look at core values. And a lot of us stopped living according to our core values because society wanted this from us, or other influences wanted this from us, or a job required us to change and be this way, or a relationship, we tried to mold ourselves to be this person in this relationship, and we start to get really far away and even forget what our core values are. So bringing it back to what are your core values, and then also how do we express that? And this can only happen after the first 2 steps are done, right? Because we need to first know what the problem is, and then we need to remove all the stuff in the way in order for those values to shine without anything blocking them in the way. The A is for action, because again, nothing happens without actually taking action. But taking action at this point should be as easy and effortless as it can be, because all the roadblocks were removed from you. So it should feel natural, like a natural extension of like you just being sustainably motivated because this is what you want, right? You're aligned at this point. And then the M, which is the last part, is manifestation, because yes, we're very good at taking action, but often it can be just, it's a lot. Like it's brute force. It's well, it shouldn't feel like brute force, but it is still very proactive. It takes a lot of energy to take action. So when you are really aligned with what you want and there are no blockages in the way, and you are taking action, then you should start also attracting like a magnet the things that you want in your life. So that is my dream method, and that is the method, I guess, that I use in my coaching.
Yeah, I love that. And that what's interesting is, following your evolution is kind of like you're coming to this point where you're ready to, be a coach and a mentor, assimilating all these experiences. Um, the other question I have for you is, the biggest turning points in your life, especially as it
Yeah.
relates to growing up in San Francisco and, kind of reaching low points. Talk about that journey.
I had, I think, one of my most significant low points in 2016. I had failed at my first startup, which was a house flipping business. I had paid so much money for very expensive courses and got myself into a lot of high interest credit card debt and eventually couldn't pay that back. And at the time, I was also in a series of very, let's say, toxic romantic relationships. I was financially just not able to make it anymore. And I had to move back in with my mom. And I was so, I guess, like, what's the word? Not just disappointed, more like humiliated with myself that I didn't want
Mhm.
anybody to know that I was home. Excuse me. And yeah, my confidence was just at an all-time low. I had too much pride to go back to getting a job because I had made up my mind I want to be an entrepreneur, but I couldn't afford to. So I actually got a job at a real estate investing company where I learned way more about real estate investing than trying to do it by myself with just seminars, which were, concept but not practice. And that was when I took my first personal development course because it was a dark time, let's say.
Mhm.
And during that personal development course, I had a lot of insights about like different personas that I put on in order to protect myself from being vulnerable. Like I had to have it all together. I had to be the go-getter and the tough one and the performer and all these things. And I had a hard time asking for help. If someone got too close to me, I would find ways to sabotage the relationship, especially romantic relationships. I always found a way to sabotage them. And through the course, I saw a lot of my old patterns, and where they came from is from childhood traumas. And then I got to create some new beliefs, like I can be a loving, loyal girlfriend in a long-term relationship. And when I got in my first relationship after 9 months of being home with my mom, it didn't last very long. It lasted 10 weeks, but I got to be the kind of girlfriend I always wanted to be in a relationship. See, people think it's often about the other person, right? Like, oh, my relationship was successful or not because of this other person and how they were and blah, blah, blah. No, it's always about us, right? So this other person wasn't the right fit for me, but I got to be the kind of girlfriend that I wanted to be in a relationship, and I had the confidence. In addition, my career was stabilizing. I was growing a lot. And the next person that I dated was my husband. So it just happened that fast when you're aligned, you know? So, yeah.
Interesting, because it reminds me of this process of healing, and as you start to know and heal from, you start to attract the correct alignments.
Yeah.
How can I think for those of you that are interested in like digital nomadism and relationships, career coaching, how can people find you and reach out to you and follow you?
Absolutely. So right now, like I said, just launched my life coaching official business this year. So the link to my free 5-day challenge, I'm sure you'll post it everywhere. This is like a very, very big sample of me for 5 days. It is, I don't know, just super life-changing for people. And through there, I also will introduce you to different programs that I do. But early on in my practice, I believe in actually having people interact with me and get an experience with me before they commit to something. But yeah, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. You can share my links as well. And feel free to connect with me. I'm very open to chatting in the DMs. And just at this point where I'm at is I just want to make my work known. I want to connect with people, especially people who are interested in breaking through mental barriers. If there's a way that I can help, I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, really fascinating conversation, and really love your evolution. And thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate you, Chris.